What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Today I present to you the concept of recursion. So we're going to take a look at this PowerPoint and see how recursion works, and we're going to go in depth on how it works. And we're also going to get some practice with it by coding in Visual Studio. Now, just a quick disclaimer, you do not have to code in the same language that I'm coding in. Recursion is just an idea or a concept, not some kind of syntax that's particular to a certain language. It's only a concept, so you can implement it in any language that you want, whether it's Java, JavaScript, C Sharp, C++, any language that you want. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into this PowerPoint. What is recursion? Recursion is basically a way to solve problems. Now, you can look at recursion as the idea of a function being defined within itself, or you can look at recursion as a function that calls itself internally. And recursion is very similar to a loop in that it is continuous. It continuously executes over and over and over. Let's take a look at this animation here that I have. So we have a function defined called say hello. Now, as you know, when the compiler hits this function, control is obtained by this function, and all the statements inside of that function execute. So once the compiler hits this function, the first line of code is executed, which just prints hello to the console. Then the next line of code is executed. But as you can see here, this line of code is the function redefining itself, is the function calling itself again. So what does that mean? That means basically control returns back to the top of the same function. And then again, all the statements inside the function execute. So we print hello to the console, and then we call the function again because the function is still calling itself. It stays there. It's continuously calling itself. So we return back to the top, and this goes on and on and on. This is a continuous process. Now you may be wondering, how can we stop this execution? What if we only want to limit it to a certain number? And what happens if this continues on and on? Well, if this continues on and on, you get what's called a Stack Overflow exception. That basically means that the call stack, which is a certain data structure, has reached the maximum capacity of calls that it can hold. So now you get an exception which is telling you that you have too many calls on it. You have to do something about it. It's basically like an infinite loop. It's the same exact way as an infinite loop. Now, how exactly can we control this? Well, the same way we control a loop. As you can see here, we've got a loop. And within the parentheses, we've got our control variable. We have a variable named I, which is set to 0. And we take I and we compare it to 10. For as long as I is less than or equal to 10, we want to continue to print I out and increment it each time that we print it out. So I is 0 the first time, we print I out, or I is compared to 10, then we print I out. I is 0 is printed out, then we increment I, which is 1, then so forth. 1 is compared to 10, and it continues to print out. Now, this is what controls the function of the loop, or the number of times the loop iterates. Similar to that, with recursion, we have what's called a base case, which basically lets us know, hey, when we reach this certain point, we want to stop recursion. We don't want to recurse anymore. So as you can see, we have an iterations variable declared at the top, passed in as an argument. And we take that iterations variable, we head to the first line of code inside of the function, which is an if statement that compares the iterations variable to 0. If the iterations variable is greater than 0, then we jump inside of this if statement, which is between these curly braces, and we execute all the statements. So we print out hello to the console, and then we call the say hello function again, but this time we want to decrease iterations by 1. So if we pass in the number 10 by here, 10 is compared to 0, 10 is greater than 0, so we jump into here, we print out hello, then we call say hello iterations, which is 10 minus 1. So now iterations is 9. 9 is passed into here, and it continues on and on until we reach this base case, which in this case is 0. So once we reach 0, we say, hey, we want to stop now, jump out of this, and we are done. we've printed out hello 10 times. So let's say we have 3. Passing 3 here. 3 compared to 0. 3 is greater than 0. Constant right line, hello. Then 3 minus 1, which is 2. 2 is passed in. 2 greater than 0, yes. Print out hello. 2 minus 1 is passed into the same function, which is 1. 1 is passed into here. 1 greater than 0, yes. Print out hello. Now 1 minus 1, which is 0, is passed in. So 0 is passed in. We test 0. Is 0 greater than 0? No. 0 is equal to 0. So now that we've reached our base case, we jump out of this and control returns back to whatever line of code is after this function. Now let's go ahead and jump into Visual Studio and get this coded up. And as I said before, you don't have to code in C#. You can implement this in any language that you want. Whatever language you feel comfortable with, you can do that. But in this particular video, I'm going to code it in C#. So let's define a function called say hello. I want to create 2 functions. We're going to create a say hello function, and we're going to define a countdown function. That function is going to be a bit cooler than this one. Say hello. Now you might be tempted to do something like this. Remember, we passed in iterations into here, but you might be tempted to declare it here. Let me show you what happens when you do this. Spelled that horribly wrong. Then you might want to decrement iterations and call the say hello function again. You might be tempted to do something like this. So as you can see here, it looks like it might work. So we have iterations and we set it to the value 10. So 10 is compared to 0. Is 10 greater than 0? Yes. So we jump into here. We print out hello. Then we decrement, or we decrease the value of iterations by 1. So now iterations is 9. Then we call say hello again. Return, control is returned to the back. But once we execute this first line of code inside the function, we see that iterations is reset back to 10, which doesn't make any sense because we decremented iteration. But because we have this initialized inside of the function instead of passed in as an argument, it's continuously being reset back to 10 no matter what value we pass in or no matter how many times we decrease this. So again, you get an infinite loop or a Stack Overflow. So we never have a base case really. We never really reach the base case if we're initializing the variable each time back to its original value inside of the function, which is why we pass it in as an argument. And then we're going to get rid of this statement. We are going to pass in iterations minus 1. Let's go ahead and test this out. I'm going to pass in the value 10 here. And we are going to see how it works. And there you go. We've printed out hello 10 times. And let me actually do something here. Once we reach the base case, we want to enter this else block. Right line. End of recursion. So once we reach the base case, we just want to print out end of recursion. As you can see here, we've reached the end of recursion and it gets printed out. So this means that we've gotten to 0. So we execute this statement, end of recursion. So now let's define a cooler function. Let's create a cooler function with recursion. Let me get rid of this function inside the main one. Let's define a countdown function. Let me comment this out. Oops. So let's scoot this down. We're going to define a countdown function. Void countdown. And just as we did before, we're going to pass in an argument. And we're going to call it count this time. So, if count is greater than 0, we want to execute the statements inside of here. We want to console that right line count. But we also want to add some kind of animation to it, just for the fun of it. We're gonna create thread.sleep. We're gonna call the thread.sleep method. All this does is just pauses execution for however many milliseconds we pass in. So in this case, 1,000 milliseconds is equal to 1 second. We have to include the class library using system.threading. Make sure you put the using statement up here. I just used the helpful tool that we have here in Visual Studio. I forgot the name. Okay, so thread.sleep, console.writeLine count, then we call thread.sleep, then we call countdown again. Again, we're using recursion. This time we want to decrement count. So what we're doing here, this thread.sleep doesn't have anything to do with recursion. I just put that there simply for animation purposes, just to make it look cooler. I'm going to explain this in a sec. I want to console.writeLine. Let's just say this is a countdown for a rocket ship. Blast off. So in this case, we're doing the same thing. We're passing in a number. The number is being compared to 0, which is our base case. We're going to console.writeLine that number. Then we're going to pause its execution for a second. And then we're going to call it again and pass in the number -1. So 1 less than a number until we reach to 0. Once we get to 0, which is our base case, we are not going to jump into this if statement, but we're going to jump to this else statement. And all it's going to do is console.writeLine or print to the console blast off. So let's call this function. So we're going to call it count down, and we are going to say 10. So let's see how this works. There we go, it's counting down from 10. And again, the thread.sleep is what allows us to see this animation rather than the numbers just printing out directly. Blast off. So we've counted down from 10, and I'll show you again just because I think it's really cool. Count down from 10, and then once it reaches the base case, we just say blast off. So I hope I explained this the process of recursion to you guys very well in a really cool way and interactive way. I hope it makes sense to you all, and if you like this video, please hit a like. And if you want to stay tuned for more, I've got plenty more content coming soon. Please be sure to subscribe, and I'm going to show you this from 100. And you can leave the video. I just want to see how this works. You can leave the video, but thank you very much for staying tuned. Please be sure to subscribe, and I will bring plenty more content to you all. Or I'm going to stop this. It's getting annoying. I will be bringing plenty more content to you all. Hope you all have a good one. Peace out.